Hi guys, and welcome back to Bookhaven with me, Kim. Today I'll be doing a February wrap-up and talking about some of the books that I read this month, so stick around. So far this month has been a little bit of a flop, and I have to say sorry if you can hear my dog Lucky in the background. He is gnawing away at a bone, and he has been missing me for like the last 2 weeks, so there is just nothing I can do about it. Maybe he'll come on video and say hi later. But for now, we'll talk about some of the books that I read in the month of February. This month was a bit of a flop. I went through a huge sort of book hangover and reading slump. I had so many good stories surrounding me, but I just couldn't get into any of them. But I did manage to finish 5 physical books and 1 audiobook. The most recent book that I finished is Sea Over Bow by Linda Kenyon, and this was such a good book. If you love sailing, this is a great biography / autobiography written by Linda. She had been married for 25 years and her marriage ended really badly, and she was living on her own and ended up meeting the man of her dreams, as cliche as that is, and taking off, selling everything, the house, the cars, everything, and buying a boat, working on it and putting it down in the water and sailing it down to the Caribbean. And from the Caribbean they worked their way up and ended up doing a North Atlantic crossing all the way to the Azores? I don't know if I said that right. The islands that are owned by Portugal, the Azores Islands. It's a very short read. Let's see how many pages. I think it was like 207 pages, but it took me a long time to finish this. I didn't want to put it down, but then I didn't want to keep reading it. When I really enjoy a book, I have a hard time sometimes finishing it quickly. I just don't want the story to end. I gave this book 4 to 5 stars. It was so entertaining, and the one thing I really liked about this story and what this author did is she wove the timelines, talking about her present day being in the middle of the ocean on the sailboat with her boyfriend Chris, and she would weave that story in really well with moments from her past. It was just beautiful how she did it. So, Sea Over Bow by Linda Kenyon. Then I read this YA fantasy called Airborne by Kenneth Oppel. The story is about Matt Cruz, and he's a cabin boy on the Aurora, which is an airship. So it kind of has a little bit of steampunk vibes. Not really, like that's not, I think, what it was meant to be, but still airships are really cool. So one day while he's working on the ship and he's on lookout, he sees a ship that isn't moving, so he hails the captain and they check it out. And there ends up being an unconscious man who is very ill and very hurt, who they take aboard, but it's too late to save him. Fast forward a year later, and they're going on a big trip, I think from somewhere in the United States to Australia, and they take on a very mysterious passenger at the last minute, and this passenger ends up shedding some light on the man they found a year prior and why he was out there, what happened, and a book full of mysterious drawings of these air creatures is brought to light. And Matt has spent a lot of time out in the air on his ship. I think he's been a cabin boy for like 3 years, and before that his father worked the ships for a very, very long time. So there's mystery, there is adventure, there's just like a dash of romance in this. It's really not a focus, but it's nice that way. And there's just really exotic backgrounds, tropical islands, the airship, and also European and North American destinations that the characters are in briefly. So if you're looking for a really fun read that you'll just fly through, I would highly recommend Airborne by Kenneth Oppel. I give this book 4.5 stars out of 5. The next book I read was Everlast by Sara, Holland. This was a book recommended to me by one of my booktube friends, and I'm glad that she did because I really enjoyed it. I have to explain to you, when I give something 3 stars, which is what I did give this book, it can really go either way. It can be on the low end of 3 stars and means I enjoyed it, but it wasn't that great, or it can be on the high end of 3 stars and I did enjoy it. It wasn't a perfect story, but I'm glad I read it and I would recommend it to people. Now this I give 3 stars, but I think it goes on the higher end of 3 stars. I really enjoyed it. There were some things I didn't agree with in the story and how they did, or I didn't like personally some of the choices they made in the story, but I would recommend this to someone. It was so fast, I flew through it, even though there were parts that kind of frustrated me. It ended up being just a really enjoyable read. This book is just basically about time and how time can be extracted from your blood. And so as you can imagine, there's a big disparity between the people who have a lot of money and a lot of time and the poorer class who are struggling and selling off their last moments in life just to get by, as you can imagine. There's an interesting magic system here. There's some wonderful characters, a little bit of romance that I found somewhat confusing. But like I said, overall very fast and easily readable story. This is Everlast by Sara Holland. Then this cover you might have seen in January or early February. I can't remember where I had said I wanted to read it. This is Cryptid Hunters by Roland Smith, and I think the cover makes me laugh. I think the cover is interesting, but I would say if you're not a fan of the cover, don't judge a book by its covers, because I had so much fun in this book. This is about a couple of kids who are twins and they're in boarding school. Their parents are these great adventurers that are always climbing mountains, taking pictures for things like you would think like National Geographic, and just really going all over the world, getting up to all sorts of fun things. And one day they find out that their parents have gone missing in the Amazon while out on an expedition, and that they suddenly have this uncle they never knew about that they're going to go live with. So they're pulled out of school, they go meet their uncle, and that's where the adventures begin. A lot of this takes place in the Congo and Africa, and there are some mythical creatures, or not technically mythical, but yeah, mythical. It's about a cryptozoologist and this man who studies creatures that are thought to be mythical, but that are trying to be proven exist by some people, like Bigfoot and dinosaurs and unicorns and all these different things. I gave this book as well 4 to 5 stars. It was so much fun. I flew through it, and I'm really looking to continuing the series with this author. And last but not least, in terms of the physical books I read, I've got Guardians of the Wild Unicorns by Lindsay Littleson. I was sent this by the author in exchange for an honest review, and I'm so happy to have found this book. I absolutely adored this book. I'll probably be doing a feature on it somewhere in my middle grade Mondays, but I gave this book 4.5 stars out of 5. Now this really is for a younger audience. I wouldn't suggest it if you're an adult looking for a fantasy. This is probably something you would really read your 10-year-old at night and have a really good time doing it. But as an adult who loves books that are in the age range for middle grade, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I have actually never read a book that had anything to do with unicorns. It wasn't absurdly magical. The unicorns were in the story in a really beautiful way that sort of touched on the history of how important they are in Scottish history and folklore. I had no idea how important the unicorn is to Scotland and how you can find statues of them all throughout the country. So this is a story about Rona and Lewis, who go to school together, and they basically are away at a sort of camp with their classmates for a week in the Scottish Highlands. And they're doing all these sort of adventurous outdoor stuff, which Lewis isn't really a fan of. And one day he thinks he spots a horse, but it happens to have a horn coming out of its head, and he is shocked to discover that he saw a unicorn. Now the two of them end up finding out that these unicorns are the last of their kind and have been living in a nearby forest, sort of with magical barriers to help protect them for the last, hundreds of years. There is a very dark and evil gamekeeper out to make money off of them, and Rona and Lewis are the only ones that can help them without, putting the secret out there for everyone to know about these unicorns. So it's about their adventure, and I think it's really neat. When I read this, I read the back of the book, and it gives you a little synopsis, and then down here it's like, try me, read page 30, and you go to page 30, and it really is the perfect kind of way to find out if the story is for you, and just the The writing is so magical. This author is so talented. I think she would do a fantastic job at an adult fantasy series. Like, I love the way she writes. So anyways, this was a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I'll be talking more about this in a later video. But this is Guardians of the Wild Unicorns by Lindsay Littleson. Now, the last book I read was on audiobook, and that was Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. I listened to this while doing a big road trip out to visit some family, and it was wonderful. I am not a huge reader of science fiction, not because I don't like it, I just don't gravitate towards it or have as many recommendations in sci-fi, so I definitely like to read more. This was such a great story. It was also an introduction to Brandon Sanderson for me. I gave this book 4 to 5 stars. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really loved that there was like an AI with a bit of spunk and personality. And without giving too much away, because I know this is on a TBR for a lot of the people that I know through BookTube, if you're interested in this book, I highly recommend the audiobook. The narrator was so great, and I had so much fun listening to it on my drive. If I was to reread a book again by listening to it, Skyward would definitely be one that I would consider because I had such a great time. So the month isn't over. There's a couple more days in it, and right now I'm currently reading Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, and I think I can finish it by the end of the month. So maybe that'll top my books up to 7 books for the month of February. I'm also working through The Raven Master by Christopher Scaith and one other book I can't remember, but that could be potential 2 or 3 books more that I can finish in this month. But I wanted to get the video in when I could, as my videos are becoming less and less frequent, unfortunately, because I've been working away from home, unable to make videos. So bear with me, it'll just be a couple more weeks before my schedule goes back to normal. Alright, here's the little monster that you can probably hear chewing on his bone throughout the video. So thanks guys for sticking around. If you've read any of the books that I have this month, I would love to hear your thoughts. Or if you have any recommendations for sci-fi for me or for any books in general, I'd love to hear them in the comments down below. If you're new to this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe, and you'll see more of the same coming your way. Maybe more of the same cuteness. No. So thanks again for joining me, and until next time, keep reading and have fun. Bye guys!